Wherever there are shadows, there are people ready to kick at the darkness until it bleeds daylight. This is Bleeding Daylight with your host, Rodney Olson.
Welcome to Bleeding Daylight. Thanks for listening. There are hundreds more inspirational episodes waiting for you at bleedingdaylight.net. Please follow Bleeding Daylight on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok and YouTube. We know that life has its ups and downs, but it also has its storms, the things that seem to come out of nowhere and threaten to defeat us. How can we prepare for storms when we don't know they're on their way? My guest today has faced storms of many kinds and is now helping others find ways to ensure that no matter how hard the storms hit, they can find a way to survive and move beyond whatever may come. Growing up, faith wasn't something my next guest came to easily. It came through a story involving twin brothers he didn't even know existed until his teens, and a grandmother whose quiet devotion changed the course of his whole family. That's the kind of foundation Garvin Antoine has built his life upon. He's the author of Build Before the Storm, a book about why waiting for the crisis to hit before you prepare is always too late. And he's put that same conviction into faith tech tools, helping churches keep their people connected long after the sermon ends. Whether you're rebuilding your faith or just bracing for whatever's coming, Garvin's got something practical for you. Garvin, welcome to Bleeding Daylight.
Thank you so much for having me.
Those growing up years sound a bit complicated. Can you give me an idea of family life for you as a boy?
Well, I did have both parents. My mom was the quiet one. My dad was a provider, but he was an alcoholic. From the day that I knew him, I can remember him. He drank almost all the time and he smoked all the time. It was really strange because we grew up really poor, and I remember times that we complained. He would always talk about, well, I'm from the Caribbean, and he would say, well, you have a roof over your head. What are you complaining about? It didn't make sense to me. And I remember in my formative years, those turbulent teen years, he would drink, he would come home and be noisy and create a lot of things. He would never hit my mom, but cursing and all of that. I grew up with the anticipation of, I couldn't wait until I was big enough to fight with him because he just made our lives so miserable. There was just so much that I didn't understand. It is only in my later years when I found out about his childhood, I was so sympathetic. He was one of 7 brothers, I think 2 sisters, the second to last. His dad came home one day and told them that he had sold the house that they were living in. His mom had passed already, and he was 10 years old, and he was then on the street from the age of 10. All of it started making sense to me. Now I knew where he got those habits from and why he was so adamant about, well, you have a roof over your head and you have food. But, in your younger years, it just didn't make sense. And all the tough times that we had, and it just didn't make sense. But now it was coming together. I say my dad was commendable. He did a tremendous job for the upbringing that he had. In him trying to raise us, he was really limited in his resources. He couldn't prepare us for the storms of life. I remember him telling me, go to school and learn your work. But he couldn't teach me the work. He didn't go to school. This is the foundation that we had growing up. I would always say that my mom was very loving, very quiet, very easygoing, and the love of the neighborhoods and all of that. I didn't put it all together until some of the experiences that you mentioned earlier started coming together.
Tell me about that experience of finding out that you had twin brothers a little bit later in life.
It's so interesting. I didn't grow up in a religious home. I didn't know my family on my mother's side. I knew my uncles and so on my father's side because we lived somewhat in the same community. There were like about 3 or 4 brothers that lived, so I grew up amongst my cousins and so on. But nobody was religious. Nobody really went to church and all that kind of stuff. I remember my dad, he was a joiner carpenter, and he would work in people's homes and rich folks. And I remember him having a picture of the devil, a black picture with a pitchfork. But we weren't religious. I mean, there's a lot of superstition in our culture, and all of that. But at one point, that was it. My mom never spoke to us about religion. I wasn't confused because I just didn't know. I know I had some strange convictions. It was only in our later life, as I mentioned, that I found out that I had not just one brother, but we had a twin brother. And then finding out the story that they didn't even know one another. Apparently at birth, they were separated and given to different people because my mom, she was the youngest of a large family also. And she left home as a deviant child, had those boys in her younger years. That was a secret in my community. That's like taboo. So we grew up being told to be good boys. I had two sisters, one has passed, but we weren't really given good guidance in terms of how do we do that. We were told not to keep bad friends. There was really little that we were given, especially from a spiritual standpoint. I was so surprised when eventually, and I can't remember how the conversation started or what, that we found out that we had a bigger brother. That's how it started. We had a bigger brother. When we met him for the first time, we started frequenting my grandmother's house. That's my grandmother who he grew up with. My mom's complete family, all her brothers, all her sisters, the aunts, everybody were Christians. I didn't understand all these dynamics because I didn't even really know what a Christian was at that point. My brother, he lives in England, in fact. I started at that point kind of growing up in his shadow because I was more of an introvert and he's the extrovert. So I grew up trying to be like him. Once I knew him, I'm trying to be like him. And he's the one that would come to our homes. He would go into other people's homes and open their refrigerators and all that. I'm like, how do you do stuff like that? And I wanted to be like him. He was the one that exposed me to Christianity. I am so thankful because from that, my mom came back to church, was rebaptized, and she never left until she passed. And my younger brother came to church. He's a little off and on now. My sister came. My dad never fully committed, but he did come a few times. That whole experience, it was interesting, but I never questioned God about how things happen. There were a lot of things that I wish I knew before the time I knew it, but I'm still grateful because we didn't find ourselves as dissidents. We didn't grow up as troublesome kids because in our society, you would be whooped really seriously. You know, your parents, we had that type of discipline and the whole community would whoop you if that's what was needed. So we were kept in check. There was so much that we didn't have, but I'm still grateful for the path that we took. All things worked out well. In retrospect, because my mom and they were not able to give to me, I think I lost a lot of opportunities in schooling and stuff like that. I was what they would consider a bright kid, but I didn't have any guidance. I didn't know what to do. My parents didn't know anything about what is college and what is higher education and all that stuff. So even though I was past the exams, I had zero guidance. I remember growing up and being in classes with some of the kids of richer families and stuff, and I always found them to be privileged, and it's something that stuck with me, and I was almost bitter because I was never given the guidance and the foundation that I needed to prepare me for what life had. I just graduated in high school, and there was nothing almost for quite a while, and as I talk about it and think about it, it's still a bit painful to kind of internalize because I'm still adjusting from that experience. Most of what I do in terms of my coaching and mentoring is to get younger people to capitalize on the opportunities of preparation they need before life really hits them. I was part of the first class in the Caribbean to do computer studies, and I dropped out. That was in the 80s.
It's tough when we have parenting that is not as it should be. And then, as you say, you look back and you realise, well, that comes because my dad's parenting wasn't what it should be. When did you start to break free from the expectations? And as you say, you're still working through some of that stuff. But when did you start to break free from the expectation of just following on the family line of not quite being enough?
The aha moment for me, as I think I mentioned it, was when I found out about my father's childhood. All that bitterness, and it was bitterness, and all the anger that I had and for him and all of that, it just disappeared in one conversation. Because I didn't understand what he had to deal with. I didn't understand that he was never given a chance to prepare for the storms of life. He was just thrust into the streets as a 10-year-old kid. it all came together. As I said, we grew up poor, and I think about our home. It wasn't the best of homes by any stretch of the imagination, but it was a home. And he made sure that we had a home. He made sure that we had food. We had tough times, but he would do what he had to, go into the hills and plant stuff, and he would rear chickens and all that type of stuff. And he would do everything. He was never a lazy father. Never a lazy father. Everything just exploded in one moment in my head. There was even one time that I had a big falling out with my younger brother because he was bitter too. He wanted to fight my dad at one time, and me and him got into a big scuffle because he didn't get it. He didn't understand it, and he's carrying the bitterness, and I'm there. Okay, I understand, and I had to almost like pound the senses into him. Hey, no, man, that you can't do that. You can't fight with that. I think those were the experiences that kind of shifted me. I was ever looking for opportunity since then. It was difficult because in my society, it's really tough. It took me quite a while to get out of it because nobody gives you anything. And if you don't have the right type of foundation and the right connections and that type of stuff, you're stumped. I live with a lot of these things, and I have to push through, even at this stage in life where I have more opportunities and more exposure. That's why I lean so much into coaching and mentoring younger folks, especially in the church communities and stuff. I understand what I didn't have. That is one of the pillars in the framework that I offer in the book. There are 5 pillars: awareness, preparation, clarity. There is sustenance and support. But support is just having the right people in your corner. When we talk about the right people here, we are not talking about just family, because I had a good mom. But that's not what it's talking about. It's talking about the right people with the right tools to take you to the next level, who are ahead of you like mentors, people that can speak to a career path and speak to the right choice of classes and education in regards to your vision. Having those people in your life, it's mandatory as part of your success. And reading Henry Cloud on The Power of the Other, it's where that was so much, even much more cemented, that we are never our best selves unless we have the right other people in our lives. I speak a lot on communication and conflict resolution because in that there's the opportunity to tell people to shift their thinking about what they see happening. Understand that these storms, these conflicts are going to come, but how do you navigate them? It's about being prepared and understanding somewhat about how the brain works and how the mind works and how people interpret life, that you are not always seeing what is there. And even though you're trying to interpret people's behavior, there's so much you don't know.
A lot of your mentoring certainly focuses around building before the storm, and your book, Build Before the Storm. And when we look at a literal storm, when we know a storm is coming, we generally know it's going to come with heavy rain or wind, and so we know how to prepare. We pack away loose items around the house. We might even tape up windows if the wind is going to be that strong, because we know the kind of storm that's coming. How do we, on a day-to-day basis, start to build when we're not quite sure what the storms are going to be? We know that there will be storms in life, but we're not sure what form they'll take, whether it's going to be an illness, a bad diagnosis, or a broken relationship, something happening in a career. There's so many storms we can encounter. How do we start to prepare for them if we don't actually know what the storms are going to be?
When I talk about awareness, it's really about accepting the fact that life has storms. And that might seem to be a simple thing, but most of the times we tend to do what Popeye was doing, which is where I got this story from, really. Because I grew up reading comic books, which is another story. That was forbidden. I had to hide with candlelight to read comic book. But about 3.5 years ago, they were filming the Popeye the Sailor Man's movie, or it had just come out or something like that. So I was there and I was thinking about Popeye, and I'm seeing him having to fight Brutus. And Brutus would come every time and try to take away Olive, which was his wife and the baby, and always beat Popeye down to the ground. And it's with his last breath that he would dip into his pockets and take out the spinach. And this was a story every time I'm saying, why doesn't he eat his spinach before he leaves home? I'm there for the first time after all these years thinking he knows that Brutus is going to come and try to take Olive and beat him and all of that. Why doesn't he eat the spinach? But above all, Brutus is always well prepared. Brutus never has to eat spinach. He comes well prepared. There is something about us that somehow we don't believe that the storms that we hear about and we see will affect us. And that is one of the critical, pivotal points. And as I said, sometimes it seems to be a simple thing, but that awareness is really powerful. If you get to the point in life where you really understand that hard times are going to come, whether it's through sickness or accidents or just life, and that they are inevitable. Growing up and going to school in an environment where the people that are around me, they have lunch to eat and I don't have. I'm seeing my storm as inevitable and I'm seeing them as having no storms. They have all the things. Their fathers are lawyers and their mothers are doctors. And so I grew up and I'm seeing myself in a situation that I think they will never experience. More than that, there's a level of ignorance even in regards to what I was going to experience in life. I didn't even know what I didn't know because I was so totally unprepared. So the awareness factor is just about that, coming to terms with the fact it has to begin there. You have to have an awareness of what is ahead of you. Most of us spend our whole lives trying to live a life to prove that what we heard from the previous generations is wrong. We just never think that some of the things that we see, some of the things that we observe and all of that, the things that our parents would warn us about and all of that, it's going to happen to us. It never applies to us. There's such a high level of ignorance. And as I said, we don't know what we don't know. So that is part of the thing. And the framework is to get to that place where there's an awareness of you're not exempt. And not just you, but the people that you think are exempt, they are not exempt either. Nobody is exempt. This world is full of wolves. And especially in the Christian environment, we know that trouble is in the hands of everybody. Everybody from the Jobs to the Davids to the Hezekiahs, so everybody experiences it. Just coming to terms with that and understanding that there is no partiality, God is not partial in what he allows and so on, is so critical.
We have that awareness, and you're absolutely right. So many people want to deny the basic facts of life that, yes, there are storms that are coming for us all in various ways. None of us will be untouched. And even those young kids that you saw in your school days who seem to have it all together, of course, now, with the value of hindsight, you look back and realise that they would have had a very different kind of storm of some sort. But where do you start to go from awareness? How do you start to build up a shield to help you during these times? And it's not to evade the storm, because we're all going to have to go through it. Is that part of the awareness as well, realising there's no way but through the storm? Then what do we do to start preparing?
There's the preparation, definitely. I grew up in Trinidad and I did have the experience of experiencing storms. I know once there were the signs and there was the news that the storms are coming, I would see people frantically running. We didn't have brick homes and things like that. It was almost straw and wood and what we call galvanized and stuff. Things were barely held together. So I remember people running and trying to put all the heavy rocks they could on their roofs and trying to support as much as they could with some of the stuff around. And so once there's an awareness that storms are going to come, there has to be some measure of things that you're going to do. And it depends on what it is. Seeing that we don't understand, there are things that we can start putting in our lives, because even the mindset to understand that these things are going to come and we are not given a list like, oh, this is going to come, then this is going to come. We're not prepared like that. We're not handed a manifest or a to-do list. Part of it would be to build the right type of attitude and mindset. That more than anything else is where the preparation is. Even though I have on the pillars the sustenance as the last item, I consider it to be one of the most important, because that is where you start building fortitude and the habits of life that allow you to carry the type of resilience and character into these experiences. That is what you need more than anything else. It's not that you need enough money for if the storm blows your house away or if this happens, and that's not really what you need. It would be, these things are helpful, but it's the mindset that you yourself wouldn't collapse internally and become a total wreck. How do you build that? Well, again, habits. And because I've done coaching, I see how difficult it is to build habits. So I know even identifying the fact or becoming aware of the fact that there are storms, and just from a almost theoretical standpoint, people know that they are overweight. They have gym memberships. They have the running shoes. They have the exercise equipment. It still does nothing for them. It still remains in the closets, and they still never go to the gyms and all of that. That's why awareness alone is not enough. There has to be some other things. And this is where this whole concept of building habits and so on is so critical. What I start with when I coach, I adopt what I call a 5-5-5 system. You have to build a habit. Nobody's coming to build a habit for you. You don't get up one day and watch a video and then you just have all these things. You have to build that because it's a rewiring of your brain. We know these things from science. Your brain has to be rewired. But how do you start? Most of us start big. We start, I'm going to go to the gym and do 500 reps because, I really haven't done it for a long time and all of that. And then we just go twice and we never go again. So the 5 minutes in the morning, first 5 minutes, my recommendation is a discerning or some time with God and so on. You spend that 5 minutes initially. The next 5 minutes is your plan for the day. And the reason it's so critical is because I tell people, if you don't have a plan every day for your day, somebody has a plan for you. Guaranteed. I love to talk to Christians about this because I say that person is walking about like a roaring lion. He has a plan for you. You don't have a plan for your day. He has a plan for you. Don't worry. He's got it. And then I always encourage 5 minutes of physical activity, whether it's jumping jacks, whether it's just stretching and so on, as the minimal. Now, that is just 15 minutes every day, just to start and get yourself into the right mindset where you can build out to longer times and more robust programs. But you would not believe how many people cannot even maintain for a full week just that simple process. So I know it's difficult. It's not easy. But it's what is needed. There is no other magic solution. You have to do it.
Seems that there's that realization for people that, yes, I can start out small. And as you say, even that can be difficult as against those who say, I'm going to conquer the world tomorrow, starting out small. And I imagine for most of the people that you're working with, that starts to build into longer and longer times. But we need to take those small steps at the start, don't we?
So important. It is so important. And I can tell you, I have to guard myself at this point because I'm making some shifts even at this time as writing my first book. And you want to catch up. You want to go all in and try to redeem the time because you got to get all these things, done because so much time has passed. And you could misunderstand what you're experiencing, thinking it's drive and motivation and stuff. And really what it is anxiety. You're just going to the gym for the first time and trying to do 500 reps. Even as time has passed and you are probably through some experiences and you're along the way, I speak to young adults who are 30 years old, 35 years old, and have had rough experiences and are almost like restarting. And they're thinking as though their lives are the end. And I'm talking to them and say, what are you talking about? All things being equal, you're about halfway there. These little things, it's only in conversations that you see how much these things impact people's lives and what people actually experiencing in their heads. Because why would you at 30, 35 years old feel as though you have wits end, that you've made so many mistakes and you didn't have so many stuff and all of that? And I said, I wish I could get that 30, 35 years again. That's the kind of shift and the kind of mindset that has to be reinforced. A change in the way we see things. I think that's why Paul talks about it in Romans. He says, be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And that really is a daily process. It's not a one-time process. It's not an easy process. It's to do things that are not comfortable. They're not nice. Having to get up and run or lift weights or not eat certain things that you're so comfortable with. Having to get up off your bed at a certain time every morning. These are not nice things. That's why the euphoria of the initial awareness, it wears off so easily. That's where people in the right, in your corner and so on are so important. Because they're going to come, hey, come on, man, you got to do this thing. We have to stay apart. There is no other way. And so you need that consistent infusion of support, whether it's mentally, spiritually, and all those things in order to do it. We are never going to get this thing done alone. I was listening to even Alex Formosi, and if you're familiar with him recently, somebody was talking about self-made millionaires and self-made billionaires. He said there is no such thing. How many people did you have to depend on in order to do what you do now? You could not have done it alone. It's the same thing here. On a daily basis, we need to understand the important part that other people are going to have to play in our lives when we are not encouraged to do the 555s and so on. Somebody who's going to hold us accountable is one of the things that is so important in coaching. Accountability, especially as an adult. Nobody's telling you, hey, what's going on? You got to do this.
What are your hopes for your book, Build Before the Storm? Who are you hoping will read it, and what are you hoping they'll do?
It's not written specifically for a Christian audience. People that I talk to, they're not all Christians, but everybody experiences storms, and everybody can be helped. Everybody can be prepared at some level or the other for storms, because storms hit everybody. The audience is really people. My hope is that people get the opportunity to understand not just what they need to do, but how they can start doing these things. And that's what connects with my childhood. I was told, go to school and learn. Those are the exact words. Learn your work. Learn your work. That's what they would say. Learn your work. That was all they told you. Nobody could sit with you and talk to you about methods of learning and study and this and that and that. Nobody could do that. That's why the book is targeted to just the general populace. These principles are not Christian principles. So the book is considered somewhat, scripture infused. That there are texts and so on that are used in the analogies, but it's something that would resonate with anybody who reads it. So that's my hope, that as much people would get these lessons and understand and be confronted with these facts that we somehow think don't apply to us, and start dealing with it, start preparing if we have found ourselves in a mess, and we can then train our kids.
I'm sure that if people have not experienced a storm yet, they can be assured that one is coming. And so I do have a link in the show notes at bleedingdaylight.net so that people can find you and get that book, Build Before the Storm. But I want to say thank you for the work that you've put in. We've only just scratched the surface, and the best thing to do is grab a hold of the book and you'll get that full platform of how you can go through and prepare before the storm hits. But Garvin, thank you so much for spending time today on Bleeding Daylight.
Well, thank you so much, Rodney. I really appreciate it. Thanks again for the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to Bleeding Daylight. Please help us to shine more light into the darkness by sharing this episode with others. For further details and more episodes, please visit bleedingdaylight.net.